Oh man, bro, a minute and 43 seconds without Stephen Curry.
And then out of nowhere, Connor's just like,
Yo,
yeah, he's gone.
Holy
Oh, God.
oh my
Jesus.
Nah, he's getting, oh my, he's getting, God, and he's still going. Holy, he's getting suspended for the year. All right, man. I'm gonna be completely honest. I don't know what's going on. So as I'm recording this, it's currently November 16th. I was literally about to shut everything down, go to sleep, but I can't. I need to get this video off my chest while it's still fresh on my mind. Because about 2.5 weeks ago, I made a video talking about the preseason and the first couple games of the Golden State Warriors season. And in that video, I was basically just saying that the Warriors look very good, at least in the earlier part of the season. I saw some good habits and just overall good enough play to justify my thoughts about them, which was that they were going to be a very good team in the 2024 season. And people sort of questioned me, and I understand because I did that video when the Warriors were 1-1, but I still did the video anyway. The Golden State Warriors went on a 4-game win streak after I did that video, bringing their total win streak to 5 and their total record on the season to 5-1. And now, since that start, they are 1-6 for a cumulative record of 6-7 as of the recording of this video. And it is interesting to kind of see how things have changed so quickly, because in that start, the Golden State Warriors looked great. They were winning games on the road, which is something that we all know they couldn't do at all last season. They started the season 5-2 on the road, which is something that was never going to happen under any circumstances last season. Steph looked great. Chris Paul, while he did struggle throughout the earlier part of the season, he still provided enough value with his playmaking to sort of make you forget about how bad he was shooting from the three-point line. He started the season shooting 5% from 3 or something stupid like that, and yet he still looked great because he had a point where he had over 60 assists with only 6 turnovers. And so there was that. Both Klay Thompson and Andrew Wiggins had crazy bad starts to the season, but the Warriors were still winning their games, and so it sort of just became a matter of they just need to wait until these guys get on board. And also, the theme of the start of the video, Draymond Green is probably having one of his best shooting seasons in a long time. He's currently shooting 45% from 3 while on 2 attempts. It's still around the same amount that you would usually see from him, and yet it's around 15 to 20% higher than what he usually is. They were playing such great basketball overall that I literally had a tweet during that win streak just noting where they ranked in terms of defensive metrics and things like that. At the time, they were 1st in opponent field goal percentage, 3rd in opponent 3-point percentage, 5th in opponent points off turnovers, 8th in opponent points in the paint, 5th in second chance points, 6th in defensive rating, and 5th in net rating. Needless to say, that is not the case anymore. And it's actually started falling apart on the homestand, which is something that doesn't make sense at all, considering what this team is and what they were last season. Like, when they said they were going to turn it around, this is not what I had in mind. Because now, since that 5-1 start, the Golden State Warriors are 28th in offense and 14th in defense. And there's been a lot of things that have contributed to this, starting with the dudes that I mentioned earlier, Klay Thompson and Andrew Wiggins. Because while they did sort of have a rough postseason last year, Klay more so just because he couldn't hit shots, Wiggins just because he missed half the season and then came back when the playoffs started. So there's a little bit more leeway there. But coming into the season, I'm sure a lot of people were expecting them to be providing offense and, well, defense on the level that we saw from them in the title run year, the 2022 season. And even last year, Andrew Wiggins in the first 20 or so games that he played last season was absolutely just destroying everybody. Up until his injury in December, he was averaging almost 20 points, shooting 51% from the field and 45% from 3 on almost 7 attempts, while still playing that lockdown defense that we would expect from him. Needless to say, that is not the Andrew Wiggins that we are getting right now. I have no idea what that is about, because there seems to be no difference in him between last season and this season, other than the fact that he had injured his ribs to end the postseason. But even then, I'm not sure that injury would have persisted that long from May until November. And so it seems like it's more just a shooting slump for him, because he is getting up less shots, and that's also just because he hasn't been as aggressive to start the year. The one area that he has been really aggressive impressive though, especially in the last handful of games, has been his offensive rebounding. He has averaged almost 3 offensive rebounds a game in the last 7 games or so. So the rebounding is still there. It's just that he seems to be very tentative on offense, I suppose would be the word. But I'm not particularly worried about Andrew Wiggins. We all know what he provides when he is completely locked in. The issue obviously right now is getting him back to that level where he's actually locked in, and obviously he should have already been there, but I'm not completely giving up on him yet, the same way that a lot of the fan base, or at least some of the fan base is. Another player that a lot of people are starting to lose hope with is Klay Thompson, because he has been very bad to start the year, to say the least. We are 13 games into the season and he has still failed to score 20 points. Klay is currently averaging 14 points, shooting 40% from the field and 33% from 3. This isn't really, like, I can't lose hope on Klay that fast, because he had a similar start to the season last year, and of course we all know that he went on to have this great season where he became just the 3rd player in NBA history to hit 300 or more threes in a year, joining Stephen Curry and James Harden. And so I don't want to just completely give up hope on him just yet, although the ending to the Lakers series was sad. His preseason was a bit alarming, and now this is also alarming, but I'm not losing all hope on him, because Klay is known for having slow starts to the season, and I don't think that that's really a secret at this point. He does it almost every year that he's played. He did it last season, the season where he came back from the Achilles. Obviously he was coming back from an Achilles, so I'm not really counting that. The 2018 year, he had the same type of start as well. In the first handful of games in the season, he shot 40% from the field and 14% from 3, and then he all of a sudden hits 14 threes against the Chicago Bulls, and then he's back. And so again, I don't want to kind of pull the plug on him just yet. I understand that a lot of people are kind of done with that. This is still Klay Thompson that we're talking about here. Like, he's not just gonna completely forget how to shoot in one off season. So I am just calming down there. Chris Paul, I talked about him a little bit earlier. He has had an interesting start to the season because he cannot hit shots either, whether it's the patented mid-range or the 3-pointer. He just cannot get anything going, it seems. Now, the playmaking and the facilitation is still there, the pace control is still there, but in order for this team to perform at their full potential, you're gonna need Chris Paul to hit shots. Like, that's just something that needs to happen. A dude that shot 37% from 3 a season ago on 4 attempts is now shooting 20%, and earlier to start the season was at 5%, and even worse than that. Like, that's not ideal. And I feel like one of the biggest red flag games from him so far was the in-season tournament game against Minnesota, where he was repeatedly passing out of shots that are usually automatic for him. He was passing out of layups. He passed out of an open mid-range at the end of the game to pass to a Dario Saric corner 3, which in turn got blocked by Rudy Gobert. And so it seems like he's having a lot of trouble with his decision making, which is something that I was not expecting out of Chris Paul. And yet that's the reality that I see in front of my face as we speak. But as with Klay and Wiggins, we know who Chris Paul is. Like, he is going to figure it out. Like, I feel like he's trying to sort of speed up the offense, or play into Golden State more so in these last few games now that they're struggling. And so I feel like he's gone away from his mid-range to get more looks from 3. But at the same time, when you're struggling on offense, any points would help. And so he just needs to take the mid-ranges. But again, I have faith that he will turn it around. But the Warriors are in an interesting spot right now because they are now below 500 after just being 6-2 a week and a half ago. They're without Draymond Green for 4 more games because he decided to join MMA. And Steph, while he's not back at the time of this recording, I assume that he is going to be back soon, or at least in the coming days. GP2 is out with a sprained ankle for who knows how long. He didn't return to the game. There's been no updates on him at the time of this recording, so we'll see what happens there. But you have this team that is so heavily reliant on 3-point shooting, and yet they can't hit their 3-point shots. And I feel like that is one of the biggest issues that they've been facing so far, especially at home. And I'm not sure what the problem is there, but they just have not been able to hit shots at home. The Golden State Warriors are shooting 26% on open threes. They're shooting 41% on wide open threes, but 26% on open threes. And a lot of those have been at home. It doesn't make any sense. At home, they're shooting 24% on open threes and 37% on wide open threes. And on the road, they have been shooting 29% on open threes and 43% on wide open threes. Like, a lot of their struggles this season have been shooting struggles, which is something that was not expected and quite frankly doesn't make any sense considering that they're shooting 40% on tightly contested threes. So, like, I'm not really understanding what is going on here. They're shooting 34 open threes every single night. 16 open and 18 wide open is about what they're shooting. And they can only hit 11. That is the issue right there. At least the main issue is that they need to hit open shots. That's one of those things where it's like, okay, they can fix that. It's like, that's not really that big of a concern. The issue that we saw in the Minnesota games and the Cleveland games is going to be their size, which is always going to be the conversation surrounding this team. They simply aren't big enough to really go matchup for matchup against teams like that, but they can scheme against them. But the problem that they've been running into has been Steve Kerr's rotations, because while they do have the personnel to go up against teams like that, they haven't been using it effectively. They have guys like Trayce Jackson-Davis, who has looked great defensively all season, especially against guys like Domantas Sabonis, and yet he barely gets any play. Corey Joseph, for whatever reason, has been getting the same amount of minutes or more minutes in some cases as Moses Moody the last few games, despite the fact that he does not really provide anything on either end of the floor, because he can't hit open shots either, and he hasn't really been doing anything outside of that. And so a lot of their struggles so far, I feel like, is just not being able to hit open shots and then just playing the wrong people, and also just the lineups that have been being put on the floor. There have been so many 3, sometimes even 4 guard lineups being put out. And while yes, Klay Thompson has shown to be a capable defender at the 4, I would prefer that he play the least amount of minutes at 4 as humanly possible when we have guys like Jonathan Kuminga on the roster for that. Obviously, Draymond Green being out for the next handful of games is going to change that, but you still have enough size on the roster, I feel like, to be able to at least have better personnel on the floor at all times. Like, there should not be a situation where you're running a lineup of Corey Joseph, Brandon Pajimski. Actually, I'm gonna stop myself right there. There shouldn't be a situation where you're running a lineup with Corey Joseph in the year 2023 of our Lord. I've been pretty lenient on Steve Kerr for about the last year or so. I felt like obviously last season a lot of the problems that they were facing were not really his fault, except for playing Anthony Lamb over guys like Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody. But this definitely deserves more blame because there's no way that in a game like this where you're going up against Chet Holmgren that Trayce Jackson-Davis should not be seeing the floor. While Chris Paul did play really good post defense on Chet, you still are probably going to need Trayce in a lot of these games just because he is the biggest player on the roster and he can play really good defense. But that is about all I have to say at this moment in time. I'm not completely pressing the panic button yet, just this is a really interesting spot that they're in. It is still early, so that's why I'm not completely freaking out, but you definitely want to fix a lot of the issues that are happening right now before they become the identity of the team. And that really should be priority number 1, because this roster should be a good team. And that's what we saw in the first handful of games. They beat the Sacramento Kings when they still had De'Aaron Fox. They beat the Sacramento Kings without De'Aaron Fox, who still played really well that game. They beat OKC, well, without Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. They still scored 140 points that game because they hit literally every single 3, which is also what happened tonight, but we're not going to talk about that. And they beat the Houston Rockets on the road, which has been a very good team to start the season so far. And so they definitely have, like, everybody thinks that I'm trolling when I keep saying that, like, this is a good tier, has the potential to be a really good team. It's just, I have no idea what's going wrong right now. And so I did say that I was going to wait about a month before I talked about this team again, but it just doesn't make any sense. So I just had to get my thoughts on record before, I don't know, I fell asleep and forgot everything. So we will see. I have faith in this team turning it around. But with all that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you're new, hit the bell to be notified when I upload, comment down below what you want to see next, and as always, I'll see you guys in the next one.